Social Service of Minnesota, empowering individuals with disabilities to shape and live the lives they imagine for themselves. Learn about LSS Disability Residential Services at lssmn.org.
This is NPR News, supported by Little Moments Count, a community movement to raise awareness and support parents based on what is known about brain development in the first 1,000 days of life. More at littlemomentscount.org.
Good afternoon. You're with All Things Considered from NPR News. The Minnesota legislature is split about as evenly as it can get, 101 Democrats and 100 Republicans. That means the ingredients for getting a bill through are different now than in the recent past. Bipartisan backing and low or no price tags, and they're all part of a winning recipe, as Dana Ferguson explains.
A Democrat and a Republican stand with a crowd of students to talk about a bill they're introducing together.
Okay, hi everybody. Steve Swedzinski, Representative Mueller.
After months of partisan standoffs at the Capitol, it's a novel scene as they propose to create a new accolade for students who excel in civics. Here's DFL Senator Steve Swedzinski.
And these guys, I'm preaching to the choir, because if we had the civic seal now, they'd all be displaying it because they're earning it by just being here today. But the civic seal is very important to the future of this great nation.
The Minnesota House returned to a 67-67 split this week as DFL Representative David Gottfried took office. It reset the power dynamic at the Capitol, where Republicans and Democrats share control in the House, and Democrats hold a one-vote lead in the Senate. The close divide changes the formula for what it takes for a bill to succeed this year. GOP Representative Patricia Mueller co-authored the Civic Seal bill.
I was a teacher for 20 years. I didn't teach history, unlike my husband.
She says more frequent news conferences featuring Republican and Democratic lawmakers will likely become the norm.
The House is at a tie now, and anything that passes has to have 68 votes. So anything that passes will have to be bipartisan.
Swedzinski agrees. He says on the campaign trail, voters told him they just want lawmakers to work together.
When I go door knocking, it's so cute. I'll say, so what's on your mind? And if they do this,
he shifts his feet back and forth near the podium.
I'll know exactly what's going to come out of their mouth, because if they do that, they don't really have anything at the top of their mind. They're not going to say, gun control or school prayer or if they do this, invariably what they say is, can't you people just get along?
At some level, lawmakers will have to get along to do the one thing they need to accomplish this session, passing a balanced budget. And with a return to a House tie this week, the trajectory for bills has shifted too.
Any bill that's going to get scheduled for the floor now is going to have to be bipartisan, coming out of the Rules Committee. So we're not going to see any more partisan fighting on the floor. It's going to be bills that have come out of committee bipartisan.
That's DFL House Leader Jamie Long. Under a power-sharing agreement, committees are evenly split and headed by chairs from both parties. For a bill to get to the House floor, it needs bipartisan support. And once it gets there, it will need buy-in from both parties to advance. Republican House Speaker Lisa Dameth.
What you normally would see at the end is going to take place, that collaborative work earlier on in committee if we're going to move anything forward. We have to deliver a balanced budget, and we recognize that.
Another facet that makes a bill an easy sell at the Capitol, low to no price tag. Lawmakers face a budget shortfall in the next 4 years, and they're looking for places to cut. Again, Dameth.
Obviously, we're listening to all of the requests, but it is going to be a very tight year.
That means groups asking for money this year will have a tough time making their pitch. Tom Gillespie is CEO of Living Well Disability Services. He says disability service advocates are trying to make the case that lawmakers should look elsewhere for budget trims.
Talk of cuts very overtly from the governor and others. On the Republican side, we're hearing challenge. We're hearing some support, but also challenge about waste and fraud. And again, as we're just blindly cutting waste and fraud or trying to root that out, unfortunately, we're cutting the good out of our system at the same time.
So what gives Gillespie a reason for hope? While both parties have looked to disability services for potential cuts, there's bipartisan support for keeping it steady in the next budget. Dana Ferguson, NPR News at the Capitol.
Comes from Lutheran Social Service of Minnesota, empowering individuals with disabilities to shape and live the lives they imagine for themselves. Learn about LSS Disability Residential Services at lssmn.org.
when the Trump administration imposed a 25% tariff on aluminum and steel goods from Canada. Microbreweries in Minnesota worried about what it meant for their bottom line. Hanny Yang reports now many are struggling over how much of the cost increases to pass along.
During a recent press conference on the impact of tariffs, U.S. Senator Amy Klobuchar introduced a special guest.
Patrick Sundberg is with us, the owner of Jack Pine Brewery in Baxter, who expects his price per can will go up because of tariffs on the aluminum that he imports from Canada.
Microbrewers say aluminum cans are synonymous with craft beer. Sundberg says upwards of 70% of all packaged beer, and specifically craft beer, are sold in aluminum cans.
Back in 2022, I was seeing costs of up to about 60 cents a six-pack. My costs. So by the time that transfers all the way down to the supply chain, we're looking at another $1 per six-pack on the shelf, and that was back in 22.
Eventually, Sundberg says, the cost of the aluminum tariffs will have to trickle down to customers.
The uncertainty is definitely a little bit nerve-wracking on my part, but at the end of the day, I have payroll to make, I have a bank loan that I need to pay off, and if my costs are going up, I'm going to have to pass that along down the chain.
The same discussion is happening at Paddlefish Brewing Company in St. Peter, where co-owner Dave Long is preparing 25-ounce crawlers for sale.
And then this is the fun part. Raise the can into the seamer. Right lever first. Seal it up. And you got your can.
Head brewer and co-owner Luke Dragseth says it's been difficult navigating the shifting craft beer scene over the last several years. In addition to the cost of cans, grain and other ingredients are getting more expensive. They're also navigating changing markets with consumers welcoming the arrival of THC seltzers. Dragseth says already tight profit margins are only getting tighter.
It's going to be hard to make the customer